let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it.
Tim, we're back.
Yes.
We're back with another review, another look into the glorious world that is documentaries people make about gaining and feedism for some unbeknownst fucking reason.
Well, made worse by the fact that we're going to be talking about a trilogy of films that we had to sit through. So collectively, we lost, 4 or 5 hours of our lives we can't get back?
Yeah, something like that. And look, I know we say this every time to you, dear listener, but the premise of this series, as depressing as these episodes typically are, is we watch this shit so that you don't have to. And also to make you aware that at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, this is what is out there about us, about our people, and we must be vigilant and be aware of what people are saying. So,
yeah, we definitely, God, I wish that some members of the community would create their own documentaries and things like that, because this has been painful. It's a very bleak landscape.
It's no good, no fun. But you know what? We're just going to get into it, so everybody strap in. So, for this episode, we watched 3 documentaries. We're looking at Fat-Topia, The Dark Side of Fat Acceptance, and Feed Me, all directed by Connor Luke Simpson. So, kicking off with the first, Fat-Topia, Simpson interviews plus-size model Jocelyn Phillips, who says, when you're a traditional model, when you start, you've got to be a minimum height of 5'8". She's, I think, 5'2", and she's like a size 26 or something, a 24. So she's like there, indicating a small height, and there, indicating a much larger width comparably. So that doesn't denote being a plus because it doesn't bring anything positive to the bigger woman or the curvier woman. Basically what she's talking about Tess Holliday, because obviously that's every fat phobe's first point of fucking reference.
No, she's the one that wound up on the cover of British Vogue, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
So it doesn't surprise me that she is oftentimes like the sort of initial point of person that people love to talk about when it comes to fat acceptance is a bad thing. Look at Tess Holliday.
Mm-hmm.
Tess Holliday is beautiful. And just putting it out there, even if she were skinny, she'd have a fucking nicer face than half these cunts. So I really don't know what they're complaining about.
Well, I mean, if she managed to make it on the cover of Vogue, there's a lot of people in control of who winds up on that cover. So
100%. I mean, it brings in a question about sizism relating to height, suggesting that short women are not able to present like a positive look, because she says it doesn't bring anything positive to bigger women because of her height versus her weight.
Mm-hmm.
Jocelyn continues, and when she's prompted to clarify if it's a height issue or a weight issue, and she says that models need to be in proportion. So does that statement align with our understanding of how the health and beauty industry attempts to influence what plus size actually is?
No, because an actual plus size, I mean, we know that bodies can vary in shape and proportion and, just the way that the body is composed. Like, not everyone's going to have the same measurements all the time, right? And there's a certain, I'm not from firsthand knowledge, but I know enough about fashion to know that they want a certain, inches in diameter around the bust, the waist, and the hips, right? And it's usually really set. Like, they want girls that are pretty rail thin because they just tend to think that those women make better clothes horses or whatever. So I would imagine that plus size is going to be, again, those perfect measurements, but just a couple of inches larger, as long as it falls within that same ratio.
Right. I think it's an interesting commentary on like the elements of body acceptance and body diversity that isn't even necessarily about fat, but height is a factor. And disability is also a part of that because body diversity doesn't just mean I'm shorter or taller than average or wider than average. It means I'm a wheelchair user. It means I use other accessibility items. It means I have, perhaps not the same number of limbs as other people. And those are all things that are worth questioning. What does that mean for fashion? What does that mean that people can and can't do, especially when you layer fatness on top of that? So I do think it is good for us to be conscious that plus size and body positivity and a lot of these topics do link together in a wider conversation, and we need to be willing to really talk about all of it, not just the parts that directly affect us. Um, Later on in the documentary, he highlights an Instagram post in which he seeks out further contributors for that documentary. And he actually reads out a comment that highlights the importance of focusing on fat individuals rather than weight loss and scientists, which is something that we speak about quite a bit. He stipulates that while he can appreciate the scope of the response, he doesn't feel his post was incendiary or inviting that level of critique. Do you feel that this response indicates that Simpson has an innate lack of understanding regarding the power he has as a director, especially regarding this subject?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me if he was just that clueless. I will say right now, before we get too much further in, that I didn't enjoy any of these. So like the way that his style of directing to me smacks of somebody who honestly doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, like he stumbled upon it because he just thought it was a controversial topic and it's going to get a lot of click views. And look, spoiler alert, this is kind of what influences the next two documentaries and their inception. So, yeah, I don't think he has an understanding. I think that's quite obvious. And if for God knows what reason you decide to check out these documentaries, I think, dear listener, you will get the same sense of it. Later on, he interviews Dr. Christopher Salute, who is the CEO of Bold magazine, and Simpson gives a monologue that suggests a somewhat libertarian approach to online engagement with plus-size people. For example, he insinuates that fat acceptance was a Wild West, synonymous with American college campuses. Does that convey a conservative ideology towards fatness?
I think so. To call the fat acceptance movement the Wild West is like to say that it's lawless, that it's unorganized, that it's, every man for themselves, which in my experience is not the case with fat acceptance. I mean, and they're still, they're not new, but they're really beginning to hit a certain stride in today's society. And I think that we have yet to see what is going to culminate from that. So I don't think it's ever been the Wild West. I don't think it's ever literally been like everyone grabbing at straws and too many voices speaking at once.
So I just want to clarify as well for the listeners, even the first inception of anything fat adjacent in terms of the political spectrum has always been organized. The very first event was a fat in, like a sit-in, from the civil rights perspective. So the fat in occurred at New York City, June 5th, 1967. It was about 500 people. So to be clear, from our first, we were organized, we took up space, and we had sacks. So we've been out here doing our thing. And I do think as well, like, it's that ideology that suggests, someone approaches you with a genuine retort, right? Like you put out a statement, oh, does anyone want to contribute to this? I'm talking about fat acceptance now, it's not too great. And then someone says, hey buddy, I could be willing to talk, but also it just kind of seems like you're starting from a not great place. And then they turn around and say, whoa, 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 I'm not being incendiary, calling out. That to me stinks of conservative ideology, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey ho. Later on, he interviews Instagram activist Fashionably Felicia, who I think excellently describes and defines the fat acceptance movement. It is worth noting when the interview says being fat is not a bad thing, Simpson visibly winces and pulls back, which indicates like a core disagreement with the sentiment, which honestly is confirmed when he follows up in the next section with misinformation, starting with fat can kill
you. Yeah, big bold
letters. followed up with a litany of quotes surrounding unsubstantiated statistics, set to the tune of the Can by Jacques Offenbach. Again, I'm going to ask an obvious question here. Do you feel that this is an intentional effort to indicate a sense of humor and stupidity on the interviewee?
Yeah, it was meant to mock her. That's exactly what I felt, because, like you said, big bold letters, and then all of a sudden in comes the can with a bunch of misleading quotes, and it's like, clearly he did this just to discredit one statement that she made. Being fat isn't the worst thing in the world. No, fat can kill you, and then on with this parade, and it's like, for Christ's sake, dude, like.
I do want to say here something that I think is really important, and I want everyone listening to take note of. If in any disagreement, debate, discussion, conversation, anything of the sort, whether you are a part of it or just observing it, if any member of that discussion tries to filibuster or derail it with that kind of ad hominem misdirect or misconstrue or loudly talking over people, misdirect, that is an undeniable sign of, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I'm going to do everything in my power to take time away from this because I have nothing better to say. I have no facts, figures, statements, so therefore I am left with nothing but to clang loudly on pots and pans and hope that no one realizes that I'm a fucking idiot who showed up unprepared.
I mean, it went from being he went from being a director to an infomercial man, like a shitty infomercial guy.
Wow, you gotta look at this.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck is he doing?
When you cut that phobia in half, boom, it kills you. Now we gotta move on. And yeah, very that. At the end of the documentary, Simpson says the following. He says, my closing words should not include sweeping statements or generalizations. As if the fucking...
Too late.
Yes, sorry. My closing words should not include sweeping statements or generalizations, so I want to be clear. My concerns about the fat acceptance movement were largely reserved for those who inhabit fat echo chambers. I was worried that they were becoming victims of themselves, unable to realize the reality of obesity outside of Fat-Topia. Oh, God almighty. Yeah, as if...
So what's a fat echo chamber? Is that just where
we only talk to ourselves and we only listen to our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions? Like someone who watches fucking Fox News or Tucker Carlson, or is an independent, non-sheeple researcher who does the research and never wore a fucking mask during lockdown. People who live inside an echo chamber.
But he smacks me as one of those people. Yeah. Strikes me, rather. Smacks me, strikes me.
He talks about it like, okay, so look, fuck it, we're just going to break this down. So, because he says, I did this because I was concerned about people who were inside of echo chambers. Here's my critique of that. If you're going to be the person providing comment, what's your background? What's your knowledge? Because you are a director here, but you don't know fucking shit about it.
And obviously you didn't do any research into the actual community itself. I doubt he went to Fantasy Feeder or to Phoebe or to any of the many message boards just to see what the kind of general conversations were like. I think he probably Googled it and then was like, yeah, I can write something about that.
It just stinks of minimal effort and fucking stupidity. Sorry to continue. He says, I was comforted by the idea that many activists were still willing to rationally speak about the critiques of the movement, but I fear that the takeover by radicals who were generating tribalistic attitudes. I think we are failed in many ways. We've known about the health consequences of obesity for centuries, and instead of proper education, compassion, and action, we now live on a globe battling an obesity epidemic. Right, okay, so...
This goes back to this beef that I have with people who assume that we don't know the risks involved, as if we are blithely skipping along as merrily as though we were on our way to a tea party. And it's like, no one is that naive.
No one's that naive. And also, we talk about this quite a bit, that a lot of the information about fat being like a bad health thing is a lot of like red flag signposting. That doesn't actually mean anything. Like a lot of articles that cite how obesity causes negative health benefits, if you follow that trail, like back to the point in which they cite where that evidence is, the evidence is a lot of the time, it is a widely accepted fact that obesity causes negative health benefits. So there is no direct correlation, like there is no science about what fat actually does in a lot
Mhm.
of circumstances. A lot of those things are just conflation. A lot of people who are fat happen to have diabetes, so therefore we believe fatness causes diabetes. Correlation is not causation, and we've said this before. We need to talk about this more. Fuck it, we might have to do like a little fucking mini series running alongside this, just talking about the health, because it's such a conversation. And honestly, guys like this is exactly why we have to talk about this, because he's walked into this with nothing but preconceived notions and then gone, well, fat acceptance doesn't correlate with my generalized beliefs that I just happen to hold on to, so therefore it must be wrong. No, and that's before you get into the whole tribalistic attitude. Who's a tribe? Who's tribalistic? What's tribalistic about
Well,
fat?
and who are these fat radicals?
Who are they?
I'm
Also,
very curious about that.
health consequences of obesity for centuries. That's not a fact. That's like 200 years ago, we didn't even know that women could have orgasms outside of the penis. So, like, fuck off with your whole we've known about the negative health benefits of obesity. That's not a fact. Please don't. Uh, what else do you say? Instead of proper education, compassion, and action, we now live on a globe battling an obesity epidemic. I would argue that a lot of fat acceptance and fat liberation is about proper education, compassion, and action.
Yeah.
So, again, it just sounds like he's completely gone left with a lot of this. Sorry, to continue, he says, we haven't done well. We've allowed gluttony to reign supreme and then ridicule people once that happens. Now, that is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
We created a society where obesity is very commonplace and very easy to occur, and society then also belittles and berates people for becoming obese. That is true. That's probably the first fucking good.
It's that vicious cycle of provide the fattening food, encourage laziness so that they will get fat, then shame them into buying a gym membership or doing some other fad diet or pouring more money back into the health and beauty industry. And it just keeps on going in a cycle.
It's really quite ridiculous. He does finish off, and I want to say this is the pièce de résistance for this first piece. He says, I support the idea of accepting and respecting someone for who they are inside of the vessel they inhabit. I mean, not judging people because of the aesthetics was a beautiful idea. But when it came to obesity, I saw the need for judgment.
So didn't he just contradict himself with that sentence? Because wasn't he just saying that?
He says, I support the idea of accepting and respecting someone for who they are inside the vessel they inhabit. And then says, when it comes to obesity, I saw the need for judgment.
Okay,
So
so I accept you for who you are unless you're fat. And
it,
that's just clearly exposing a fat phobia that he has. I think you're a great person, but you're fat, so we need to do something about that.
like, did you
Like,
ever watch the Banksy documentary where basically it was this guy who met Banksy one time and was like a huge fan of his, and the documentary's going along trying to explore like his motivations and everything, and then like at the very end of the documentary it turns on a dime because it turns out that the guy they've been interviewing is a guy that, because he met Banksy one time, decided he wanted to try to copy his art and be the next Banksy, and they've been having like off-shot interviews with Banksy the whole time talking about his art. And then, like, in this last 15 minutes, they say, oh, yeah, so this is this guy. What do you think of him? He's like, oh, he's a fucking idiot. I met him one time. He was a loser. He was drunk. And now he's trying to steal all my shit and doing a poor job of it. So it then flips on its head and becomes an expose. And I feel like this documentary low-key did that, whether that was his intent or not.
so almost as if he was bamboozling his audience
Yeah.
before he flips the script and is like, actually, I'm against all of this. I'm not trying to be open-minded about this or explore different stories. I just clearly have a problem with this, and now I'm going to lay out all the reasons why I don't like this.
It's a very Elon Musk approach to life, So, hey, listen, Connor Luke
Topical.
Simpson, you're the Elon Musk of documentaries, mate. Feel good about that. He says, so that last part, when it comes to obesity, I saw the need for judgment. straight up, do you think we need to be judged?
No, I think that's the reason why so many of us have had insecurity problems with it for so long. Why
Yeah.
so many people are comfortable with it being something that we do in the shadows. Why so many people don't want any attention brought to it, or that, are paranoid about a family member finding out, a friend finding out, a coworker finding out, someone stumbling across their social media and leaving nasty comments. Like all these anxieties build up because someone is judging us just for existing. And then, when you factor in that the majority of us are in the queer community, it's like it's that double judgment. We're already being judged for being queer. Now we're being judged for being into something that they think is weird.
hmm And it's the same thing when you factor in blackness. It all compounds. To be queer is one thing, to be black is another thing, to be fat is another thing. But when you're all three of those things, you're not three things. You're fat, black, and queer individually. You're fat and black conjoined, you're black and queer conjoined, you're fat and queer conjoined. That becomes six things. But then you're fat, black, and queer conjoined, that's actually seven things all at once. It is greater than the sum of its parts. So this is why we constantly need to keep an eye out for those of us who are the most in the margins. Just putting that out there, people. But moving on swiftly, here's follow-up called The Dark Side of Fat Acceptance. And I do want to be clear here. The reason why this documentary came about, and he does state this in this documentary, is because when he released Fat-Topia, a bunch of people had a problem with it. So he decided to make a follow-up documentary talking about how butthurt he was that people had something to say about his shit film. Just to be
This
fucking
this guy, this fucking guy. I'm sorry. This is what happens when white privilege runs amok.
Oh my
Like you create a piece of shit. Everybody criticizes your piece of shit. Then you create another piece of shit to express how upset you are that everybody criticized you.
Oh
Like
God. What was the meme post I saw about Elon Musk today? White man makes his feelings everybody's problem. And honestly, this film is
it's exactly right.
it's exactly what this is. Right, so in The Dark Side of Fat Acceptance, Simpson interviews Manal Zain. Though her presence throughout the film is really inconsistent, her narrative doesn't expound on the universality of the suggested dark side of fat acceptance, for example, that many of the specifics she highlights are presented in many online communities, like there's in-house bullying, or how there's, people with different ideas or extreme ideas. Like that is literally every community everywhere, for
Yeah,
fuck's sake.
you can't get away from that.
So, focusing on that to start, does this suggest that Simpson is attempting to whittle down a larger conversation on cancel culture in order to justify focusing on the fan acceptance community?
I yeah, yeah, I would say. I mean, look, okay, I how can I word this? The woman that he interviewed, she seemed intelligent and capable, and like she seems like she was probably a nice girl. However, a lot of what she said, and yes, of course, she would be reading off of a teleprompter, but I also think that a lot of what she said may not have been her own words. To be
Mm,
completely honest, I got a feeling that a lot of this was like stuff that had been fed to her,
yeah.
and while I do not doubt for a single second that she got plenty of online harassment, because that's just what online is like. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the real Wild West,
Oh
is
yeah.
is any online community.
Yeah, the internet
Um,
full stop.
yeah. But I feel like, because what was her major narrative again? So like she had put on some weight, right? And she discovered the fat acceptance movement and the online fat fetish communities, and she was getting popular and she's feeling accepted. But then when she wanted to turn around and lose some weight, she was getting harassed, and this was the impetus for her wanting to speak to this filmmaker.
I guess like it just wasn't very clear. And honestly, when you look at it, right? Because okay, how do I? It almost feels like you have to step back and just be like, what is a documentary? So like, what is what is a documentary? What is the what is the purpose of conversation?
Yeah, why are we filming this conversation? That's the question.
Okay, so I'm gonna put my hat in the ring here because I did go to film school, and like one of the main points of documentary is you are meant to present truth, right?
Mhm.
Now, there is presentational truth and there is objective truth. So if it's a presented truth, it's just like it's your narrative because that's it. period, end of story, full stop. Like,
Yeah.
I film you to deal with your life. And if that involves crack cocaine or rabies or Donald Trump or McDonald's, it does not matter because I followed you everywhere. If that's what I filmed because you went to those places, that is representing the truth of who you are. And it's not subjective, it's a statement of a fact. You went and did those things. This is representative of who and what you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have this objective perspective, which is where you're trying to present a concept and you are meant to present a valid argument for both and explore it. You are meant to present perspective. You are meant to present options. And he doesn't do that. What
Mm-mm.
he's doing is creating something that is meant to be objective, but filming it and producing it through an entirely subjective lens.
Yes.
Because this one person who has beef with the fat acceptance community decided to speak up, I put it out there to say that this represents a big portion of people. There is no statistic, no statement, no fact, no nothing. We have nothing else to go on other than this girl turned around and said she had a bad time, and that was apparently it. So look, this is ultimately the gripe I'm going to have with this. And honestly, I think what we come back to a lot of the time with a lot of these documentaries, that they just don't go anywhere. They don't present anything. They are laced with bias because it's very clear there is never any intention to undo any bias. They just want a good excuse to go, my feelings are like this and you gotta listen to them. It's just fucking stupid.
Do you think that he was kind of using her as his avatar as well? Like, because she was really butthurt about her experiences. And I felt like, yeah, he's like, well, I wonder if he felt, as the filmmaker, I can't just sit there with the camera on me bitching about how nobody liked my first documentary. So I have to find someone who has a sort of similar situation to me and make her my self-insert character.
He literally does do that in the documentary. At one point, it's him for like a good 10 minutes talking from his own perspective, because there was this person who said this, and look, we'll come to that. But he literally did that because
I forgot about that part. Yeah.
drive the narrative forward. So clearly, he just had to be like, I'll just do it myself for this bit. Which just goes to show that even when it came to the dark side of fat acceptance, he couldn't even find another person to ratify it. You know what I mean? But anyways, something I find interesting with a lot of these is like the use of the background, right? So like not the interview portion, but like the sort of through lines.
Mm-hmm.
There are examples used in this of social media commentary, right? Where like a post is made and there's comments underneath. But it fails to acknowledge the posters, the timestamps, the contextual comments, or even the platforms they were posted on. I can't help but feel that him doing that means that those conversations never fucking happened and weren't real, and he kind of cooked them up just to give himself something to go on. Yeah. Do you feel that?
That's completely possible, and I wouldn't put it past him, to be honest. But I mean, I suppose you could make the argument that the reason why no timestamps or platforms that the conversations happened on was fear of being sued by said platform. Because I don't actually know the rules surrounding like what you are allowed to, like when it comes to brands and logos and things like that, what you're allowed to put in a documentary or on film without paying any royalties to said company. I don't know. Well, that could have just been a way for him to avoid any copyright infringement or
could have been
invasion of privacy.
But then you know what? I think a good producer and a good director would know how to make that shit look a little bit better.
Personally. Yeah. I mean, it looked like crap, so.
So this film, it fails to highlight or interview any persons from the fat acceptance movement. And it focuses specifically on individuals who don't like it. I mean, again, it just screams of bias and... Okay, sidebar here. Do you ever feel like when we watch these, do you ever feel like offended? Where it's just like so little effort was put into figuring out the truth of us that it's just like, I'm offended that you even like slung this together and sent this to a production company and got paid money for this.
Yeah, because it's half-assed. It's like, as a wise person once said, thanks, I hate it. It's like... you just slap some shit together and you just throw it at the community and you're like, this is what we think of you. You might as well just leave a flaming bag of dog shit on my lawn. Like,
Honestly. I mean, so it kind of comes out like near the end of this that it's about this person called Grandma Gary, which he kind of infers is like a collective of people who all have like logins to this account, so you could never quite know who Grandma Gary is. And it's like, I'd never heard of this person. I don't know anyone who knows this person. And the Instagram profile that he was trying to show was like a person with like a really weird photo and like not that many followers. So it's like, if this person doesn't even crack 1,000, like we have more than 1,000 each. Do you know what I mean? It's like clearly they're not an influencer. Clearly they're not anyone of note. This was your big bad. This was like your big.
He also set it up to look as if these users under this one name were like as powerful as like anonymous, like as if somehow that this group was going to topple his imaginary empire. I don't know what. He framed them in such a weird light.
You know, watching these documentaries almost feels like my nephew coming to me with one of his shit Lego projects that's already falling apart. And I have to be nice and say, "Oh, good job, kiddo." And then he goes on to become an architect because he's just been told that he's good at things. I feel like that's what's happened here. Someone told him he was good at something when they should have just honestly deleted the file for him and said, "I'll save you the time. We put that shit in the bin." Right, so the only point of note in this documentary is how certain individuals in online spaces will weaponize their trauma in an effort to counter, remove, or deplatform those they perceive as enemies, right?
Yes.
But that's not the focus of this film. It focuses specifically on fat acceptance. Why?
Because he's trying to conflate the two things. He's trying to say that people within the fat acceptance community will do this to people who either don't agree with them or maybe have changed their mind on things or just want to have a different body at some point in their lives, right?
Yeah.
So I think he's trying to say that this is what you will experience when, I mean, I totally agree with that. There are people out there who will weaponize their trauma against other people for the purposes of deplatforming, but that is not a common thread among the fat acceptance community.
No. For the most part, it's people who just want to like not fucking hate themselves and find like a pair of pants that don't make their crotch look horrible.
Yeah, well, and not to be, made like not to be banished to certain sections of the store or have a separate store altogether or have people make little microaggressions like, oh, you're going to McDonald's again?
So I feel like when this comes up in the film, he really does try to present these moments like, aha, gotcha! Like he's trying to prove something's there when it's not easily conflated that it's there. And again, I come back to a point I made before. If someone has to go through that much effort to like manipulate the narrative to make it look like there's an aha gotcha moment, then there is no aha gotcha moment. It's someone trying desperately to make a point. Like when a twink sits down and has a stomach roll of skin and goes, I'm fat because I have a stomach roll. Fuck off, you aren't. That's not how this works. So, I mentioned before, at one point, the director becomes his own interview subject. He asks, do you think that's kind of the mindset that a lot of people in the fat acceptance movement has? To which he replies, and I quote, "This was indicative of a lot more of the fact that this community." Full stop.
Yeah, I couldn't understand what he meant by that reply. Not only was it just bad English, but it didn't make any sense.
I know we keep asking people in the community to create filmic works, but I do just ask, just check over your language and your syntax and your editing and just put a bit of effort in because...
Do you think the editor would have been like, hey, this line didn't make any sense. Can we reshoot this?
It's quite possible that he was his own editor.
Yeah, that's probably true.
He either didn't notice it because he didn't see it. I can totally see the situation being, I think that these scenes will be fine as is, and I don't need to do any editing.
Oh, God.
Honestly. What was that parody? Someone did like a parody of Cinderella, and it was to Impossible. And it goes, white privilege for a vain white man to get... No, anyways, I can't remember the song, but it's white privilege.
I've never heard that.
I'll have to YouTube it for you afterwards. People go to YouTube. Oh, and it's two lovely, sassy, fat black women singing about white privilege, and it's on YouTube, and it's funny, and it's camp, and it's gorgeous. Tim, we'll watch it after this. It's a palate cleanser.
That would be lovely.
But that's playing in the back of my head right now. So the film lacks intersectional subjects, as another point, as a way of exploring these experiences. Do you feel like that is intentional?
Yeah, he wanted to be as vague as possible so that you could draw all the wrong conclusions. I mean, God forbid that he delve a little bit deeper into the subject and get some. Well, then again, as you said, he probably couldn't get anybody else to appear. Like I don't know what this guy's tactic was for finding his subjects, but I doubt that it was a pleasant experience.
Yeah, so I mean, I just feel like it skews the audience's perception deliberately. To it creates this idea of the stereotypical lesbian asexual feminist with short, colored hair, facial piercings, and a sharp tongue with no social skills, just waiting for someone like Alan Roberts, fit and informed white masculine male, to come along and put them in their place and possibly
Hmm.
dick them down afterwards. Thank you, male, for making that for correcting me, whole fucking thing. Because of course Alan Roberts fucking involved himself in this project. Oh, good God. I was going to make a point before. I'll say this. So, I want to say something here that might seem a bit out of left field, but bear with me.
Yeah.
When I went to Bible college, the very first class in the very first unit we had to cover, which was mandatory, they pulled up on the big projector screen a spectrum of Bibles, right?
Hmm.
And this is a real thing because, of course, there's that statement of the Bible has been translated 50 billion times into languages and by different interpretations across the ages from the original Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. So, how can we possibly get the correct interpretation? And the
Hmm.
premise of the spectrum is to showcase that this is actually where Bibles fall in terms of certain ideologies, language differences, right?
Yeah.
And scholars can agree that Bibles of different designations will fall into different categories across the spectrum. In this very first class of this very first module, which was mandatory, they said to us, anytime you do a report and you use quotes from the Bible, you have to give at least 7 quotes, one from each one of these different segments, to prove your point. Because if you have a point that says, I believe that this scripture means this, and it makes sense in one interpretation but doesn't make sense in the other 6, then maybe your interpretation isn't correct. You have to give a diverse interpretation across the spectrum, because if everyone across the spectrum can agree that this is more or less the direction this point is heading in, then you may have something to say. You may have stumbled on a point, and we will listen to you. That is exactly what the purpose of diversity of information in conversation is all about. This is what's missing here. He's deliberately gone and picked one source of information and gone, this'll do, but it doesn't do. It doesn't do jack shit. It just fails. It fails on its face by its own inclusion. By only including one, you fail to the universe because you are already saying no one else would show up for this. That is the point. That is alone damning enough to say that this was a fail. Just putting it out there. But, oh, and to be honest, that's how you know your shit is fucked. When I can bring up a fucking Bible college reference and prove that understanding of the Bible makes more sense than your own fucking ability to put together a goddamn documentary. That's when you know you fucking fucked up. When
You're on a roll now, girl. You're on a roll now.
Girl, when 7 copies of a 2,000-year-old book make more sense than your documentary, you have got to sit back and ask yourself the question, where did we go wrong? And honestly, it was the day you opened up Microsoft Word and wrote Fat-Topia. That's when you went wrong. But anyways. One final statement made... Sorry. One of the final statements made by Manal Zain says, we can lie to each other all day long, but you and I know that, getting to that weight is not because you like to eat, it's because you have a disordered relationship with food. You have a terrible relationship with food, and food is your coping mechanism, and no one of these people can, try to, convince me, of a different opinion, just because that's no one in the world eats that much, just because they like to eat. They eat that much because they're trying to fill a hole, like an emotional mental hole that, you can't fill. It's like a black hole. This is the first moment in this film that they straddle into disordered eating and have any kind of connection with it to the fat acceptance movement. I think they did a fucking shit job because they just kind of shoehorned it in at the end there.
Yeah.
I don't think this girl knows the first fucking thing about disordered eating or eating disorders. So that's problematic. We're putting out misinformation on mental health situations into the world. So
She became a psychologist all of a sudden.
Because every fucking thin person knows what fat people don't. That they're a fat, lazy, useless piece of shit who has no self-control of inhibitions. Because that's what fat people are, of course. Yeah, disordered eating. You shouldn't talk on it if you don't know about it, guys.
Yeah, absolutely not.
That's mental health, that's medical, and literally so many people die from it.
Yeah, eating disorders are deadly.
Don't fucking fuck with it. Not for a casual comment like that. That was stupid. And the whole, like, all of those ums and uhs and girl, I wrote out that quote. Tim watched me replay that over and over again.
Yeah.
Get that down. Clearly, she don't know what she's talking about. And then moving on to the final film of the trilogy, this actually brings up a delightful end to tonight's charade, because we couldn't even watch it.
We couldn't find a working copy of it anywhere. I remember, like, when it was supposed to be dropping, we were anticipating being able to watch it. Like, I think you even purchased like a subscription to that streaming service, didn't you? Just so that we could watch it. And then the day it dropped, it wouldn't play. And then we went back to it the next day, it wouldn't play. I think you went back to it several times after that, and it still wouldn't play.
Yep. I've been back to it 11 times in total, because I have counted each time I've gone on to look at certain research points. I keep trying to find a copy when I have the time, and I keep the tally. It's been 11 times. Hasn't even worked. And my subscription has expired, and that was $20 I will never get back. $20 to not watch a film that didn't work, that based on how these two have gone, has truly saved me a world of pain. So look,
I don't know if I would want to see the third one, to be completely honest. I mean, I know that we didn't get to see all three films in the trilogy to properly review all three, but I'm glad that we couldn't watch Feed Me, because after sitting through those first two, I'm like, I have no hope for this one.
yeah, look, the one question I'll ask here is, do you feel that the fact that such a new film has been completely unavailable since its release says anything about the quality of these products?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know whether it's like that the file wasn't, like, I don't know, whatever he turned into the streaming company. I don't know how this works, but I don't know if he gave them a shitty copy of something, or if they gauged that the streaming service itself, if they gauged that nobody's going to watch this, we're not going to devote any kind of I don't know, what do you call IT to this. Like, we don't even care if it works, because we know no one's going to watch it. So I don't know who dropped the ball where, but clearly something went wrong, because we can't watch the damn thing.
So, what list of topics would you say these films prove Simpson has a lack of understanding of?
I mean, he has a lack of understanding about fat acceptance, its history, its mission statement, why it exists in the first place, like, and the diverse members of its community. Certainly doesn't understand the feeder community or the feedy community, and just anything revolving around eroticism and weight gain, or eroticism and beauty standards, or just accepting the body that you're in. He doesn't get any of these concepts, because he clearly stated in the first film, I'm okay with you unless you're fat. That's my line in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah, I get the feeling he doesn't understand eating disorders, disordered eating, and
Oh yeah, that too.
therefore probably mental health he's not too versed on. He doesn't understand the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. He doesn't understand syntax or editing processes based on the quality of these two films, and he also doesn't seem to understand, like, I don't know,
Basic filmmaking.
basic filmmaking. Fuck only knows. I mean, look, I've got to hand it to someone who, even though we haven't seen the third, has produced 3 films about this subject. There's got to be a reason for it. Like, to sit down and film and edit, and to have given enough fucks to make it, There has to be a reason. It's just a real fucking shame that I don't know what that reason is.
I don't either. It was either, I mean, a couple of theories. Either he knew that it might be a clickbaity subject, like
Yeah.
it's not that people outside the communities don't know that we exist. Like they do. They know about us. They just don't really probe, but they don't really ask, So I guess maybe he thought, oh, this will be really attention grabbing. And I'm sure he thought he was going to win some kind of award.
Yeah.
Or the other thing is that another theory that's a little bit more wild and out there is he could secretly be a member of said community, to be completely honest, but he could be a self-loathing member of the community,
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, God.
Because we have those too.
Yeah, every single one of them. Fuck only knows. Oh my God. I'm gonna pivot because I know we usually ask the kind of typical three, like what did we like, what did we dislike, what would we change.
I'll tell you right now, I didn't like anything.
Didn't really like any of it. What did I dislike? All of it.
Everything.
What would I change? All of it. All right, listen, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet here for ratings. Fat-Topia, I gave a 0.
I did too.
And then Dark Side of Fat Acceptance, I gave a 0.
I did too. And then Feed Me is just going to be a 0 by default because I couldn't watch the damn thing. So it's zeros all around.
Zeros across the board, Hunty.
But still not the worst thing that I've get. Like it's still not like my worst rating wasn't given to to this trilogy.
No, I think was your worst rating Fat Girls and Feeders?
No, my worst rating was
Eater.
Was it no, yeah, Eater. Eater was my worst review.
Yeah, Fat Girls and Feeders you gave a -1. Eater you gave a -2.
Yeah, and if I see anything worse than that we're going to keep going down negative numbers.
Yeah, I think at least in those regards, like they were salacious and attempting to promote some form of like strange ideal that just wasn't true.
Yeah.
I suppose one upside I'll say of this comparative to those is that this at least tried to present like some kind of documentary style of.
Yeah, it was trying to be legit, but it didn't succeed.
It didn't succeed. So listen, there you go, kids. Now comes the time in these episodes where we beg once again for someone in this community to please produce something that we can watch. We are weak. We are struggling.
The ennui is becoming quite crushing after having watched this symphony of stupidity. So
I'm not feeling ennui. I'm just feeling like fucking nihilism. That's my new drag name, Nihilism.
Nihilism.
That's my, or Nihil-jism. That's my new fucking name, bitch. Oh my God. Listen, we'll leave it there, kids. That's been another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThickyMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio or at our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/Thicc Radio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thethiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.